What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining me on another FCP Euro DIY. Today, we're going to be working on a 2011 BMW 335 IS. Today on the E92 behind me, we're going to be covering how to replace and or upgrade your vehicle's radiator. This is going to be applicable to the E9X chassis vehicles with the N54 and an automatic and DCT transmission. Today we're going to be installing the CSF all aluminum upgrade. This has a 42mm 2-row triple pass core, so it's going to be a lot more efficient than the factory OE style. A couple things you want to consider when doing a radiator replacement and or upgrade is what else you're going to need, and that's going to be some coolant. And if you can, I would also recommend some radiator hoses, at least the upper and the lower. As these vehicles age over time, that O-ring can go flat and just kind of shape itself to the neck on the old radiator. Oftentimes, if you still have the OE style one, the necks can actually break and then you have a neck stuck in your hose. So if you can, I always recommend that as well. For those of you that are going to be installing the OE style CSF replacement, you'll note that CSF includes 2 sleeves for the bottom of the radiator plug. You just want to match to whatever the one in your vehicle currently has, whether it's the shorter one or the longer one, and use that same one on your new radiator. The CSF all aluminum upgrade has a plug, which you'll see in a little bit once we get into the install. That one's pretty straightforward, one plug fits all kind of deal. Now, before we get started on this DIY, let's take a look at some of the tools you're going to need for this job. For this DIY, we're going to be using our Airlift 2 UV vacuum fill tool. You've seen us use this before on the channel. It helps not only test the system for any leaks, but it makes any cavity or small air bubble chance that we may have when filling the cooling system back up almost null. So we're going to be going with this tool today, but if you want to see how to bleed the system using the water pump, be sure to click the link in the video description below where Gareth shows you the quick steps on how to do that as well. As far as sockets go, if you're going to be retaining the OE style radiator, you're going to need a 19mm and a large flathead to swap out the petcock or drain tube on the radiators. Again, you want to match up the old one to the same size for your new one. We have a 10mm socket, an 8mm socket, a T25 and a T20. We have a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch drive ratchet with extensions. We also have a 10mm wrench for some of the harder to reach spots for the new CSF all aluminum unit. We have some Intercooler style clamps. I have a feeling we're going to be replacing a couple coolant hoses on there, so these are going to come in handy for some of those clamps. Electric tools make everything quicker. A large pry bar will also make removing the coolant hoses a little bit easier. They tend to get stuck on, especially if they are original. Those O-rings and the radiator plastic necks become one. Something that's not pictured here but will be needed is a catch can for your coolant and something to mix your new antifreeze and distilled water in. Now we know what we're working with, let's go ahead and get started on this DIY. Okay, to get started, the first thing that you want to know is that the car needs to be nice and cool. So wait overnight, whatever. You never want to work on a hot cooling system. You can injure yourself and or damage other things in the vehicle. How can you damage stuff? You have a hot block, fill it up with cold coolant, you start cracking things. Not good. So what we're going to do to help aid the coolant drain is break the vacuum seal by removing our cap and just setting it to the side. We'll set that baby right there. Now we're going to get underneath the E92. If this still has a belly pan or skid plate, we're going to go ahead and remove that and start draining some coolant. Underneath the E92, we're going to work on removing the belly pan. Now we have a little bit of a different bumper on here than you see in most of our E90s we work on. So the fit's going to be a little bit different up here, but you have a couple 8mm bolts that hold this up. We're just going to work our way around and remove them. This was covered in quite a bit of dirt before I even started, so I'm going to suspect that there's going to be some more in there. So just whenever you drop a shield like this, especially if you're in the garage floor or the driveway, just be mindful of your face and your eyes. Now that we have our shield off, we have a better view of the underneath here, and we have our intercooler here, which is going to be in our way of draining. But before we can get that baby out, we do have to work on getting this fan shroud out, which has a cooler bolted to it. T25 holds that in place. So we're going to want to zap that out first. All right, with that, that's going to be nice and loose from there. This is loose here at the bottom. Take one quick look. Everything else looks okay. We're going to come back and we'll undo the clips for the intercooler once we're ready to drop it. But for now, let's head back up top, work on getting this fan shroud assembly out. All right, up top, we have our feed that we need to remove. It's held in by 2 plastic rivets and 2 T20s. So we're gonna zap those out, and then we'll separate these 2 pieces, pull it off the air box. That's gonna give us more room to the top of the fan shroud. So we're gonna do rivet. I just like to use a set of pliers. Pull these babies up. Then this will come up once we pop the T20s out. This piece will take the accordion portion, pull it off of the air box, and lift up and pull it out. You'll see there's a little opening on either side of this neck. 2 little tabs on the air box just help latch that in place. You can give it a little squeeze or pull it back with a flathead or pick tool, and you'll get them out if it's giving you a hard time. Now that we have that out, we have a better view of the fan shroud assembly. Before we do anything else, let's get this electrical connector off. To get that off, we have a tab on either side of the plug. You're just gonna pinch them and then pull up. This harness is held in by alligator style clips. They just pinch onto the plastic on the fan shroud. So you can just go ahead and free those up. And use a little flathead screwdriver to kind of encourage them out. They're a little bit stuck on there. And that's gonna be nice and flexible, enough to move out of our way. The next thing that's up here is going to be your expansion tank hose. This is one that if it's an original item, you're going to want to consider replacing along with the radiator hoses, especially if you have the old design, not the updated design. These just over age, just like any other rubber component, can fail. And oftentimes what happens is as you're freeing it up, either from the expansion tank or the top of the radiator, they tend to break on the hard plastic portion side of things, and or they like to break off of the nipple coming off of the upper radiator hose. So just something to keep in mind. You just pull back towards the front of the car, free it up from the 2 little clips on top of the fan shroud. You can lift it up and move it around. You can see by the way I'm handling this, I'm not too worried about it. We have one on the shelf just in case this one breaks. This intercooler piping that we're going to unclip from the bottom here just has a quick disconnect style clip like our radiator hoses do. We're just going to pry that down using our flathead. I like to remove these sometimes if they start coming off, just so that we have nothing hanging us up. We should be able to work this hose back just to free it up. Okay. We have a clamp up top. Let's go ahead and tackle that one next, and then we can free this up from our shroud. We're going to undo the upper hose clamp up here. Just small flathead screwdriver will do, or oftentimes these are a 6 or 7 mil socket as well. Undo it quickly with the flathead. So this right here, this is happening live, is a great example of why we recommend hoses to be replaced. Just from messing around about here a moment, you can see how brittle and destroyed and brown this plastic is. Just tapping it a few times is all it took to break it off. So definitely want to keep that in mind whenever you're doing any replacement or upgrades on your cooling system. The fan shroud has a small rubber grommet that comes off of it that helps locate and keep the charge pipe in place. So we undid the bottom clamp and the upper clamp just to have a little bit of play in that hose. Just by shuffling it around, it popped off of the rubber grommet. It's like a C that goes around it. So typically you want to slide them up or down and they'll come off the bushing. In this case, just trying to free up the hose from the upper charge pipe here. Freed it up for us today. So just be mindful that once you get that off, then we can start working on the shroud. Until then, that's going to hold you up. Again, in 54 car, they all have it. It's just a matter of wiggling it off. If you can separate your 2 pipes up here, even better. That's going to give you some more wiggle room. But for us, just moving it around, freed it up. We have another coolant line attached to the shroud here. This is kind of a alligator style clip. You can just come in from the side and pry it open, or you can work the rivet out of the shroud, whatever is easier for you. I'm going to try to just break open the clip, not literally break it, just pop it open using a flathead screwdriver over from the side. Pull this hose away. Okay. On the driver's side of things, we have another one just like that. This one, the clip is actually facing up. So it's a little bit easy to see right here, but we're gonna go ahead and reach in and pop that one open as well. On the passenger side, we have a T25 that also holds the shroud to the radiator assembly. We're gonna go ahead and zap this one out. Just gonna wiggle in between some hoses here. Get that T25 on there. Get this baby out. For those of you following along and doing the aluminum upgrade, you'll notice that the CSF unit has different hardware. That's what we're gonna be using to secure our fan shroud assembly later on. And on both sides of the fan shroud assembly, you have a little plastic retaining tab that helps lock the fan shroud into place. You can just push off using a small flathead or your finger when you lift this up to release it. So I'm just gonna use a flathead just to show you here where that is. Pull this away from the back of the radiator. On the passenger side, it just acts as a guide. You can just lift up the shroud assembly and free it up. Okay. Now we'll make sure that our tabs get undone. We can start working this baby up. Again, you have to be mindful of the lines that are in the way, your harness. Just make sure that you don't get too hung up on any of them. You don't want to damage anything as you come up with your fan shroud assembly. All right, here's a better view of what we were working with. We had what I call these alligator style clips. They're just riveted onto the fan shroud, holding some coolant lines. Here's that rubber bushing that charge pipe kind of C-clamps around. So it's not super tight. Like you saw, just us wiggling it was enough to get it off. Now we're gonna set this baby to the side and work on getting that charge intercooler off. All right, we have the fan shroud out. So now we're gonna get underneath and work on getting the cooler out so we can get to the drain plugs on the radiator. And while we're on the topic of the brittle hoses, like this just broke off the end of our upper radiator hose, you can see how soft and brittle this is just from being an original hose, 120,000 miles, and it just is falling apart. So again, these are one of the things you're gonna wanna consider ordering, keeping on hand whenever you're messing with your cooling system, especially if it's the first time that you get in here and you start taking things apart. Because as hot and cold gets to the rubber and plastic parts, it pretty much starts crumbling down. So again, these are linked in the video description below if you want to take a look at those and see what we installed today. But with that, let's get underneath, get the intercooler out, get some cooling going. Right down underneath the vehicle, we're on the driver's side where we had already undone our intercooler hose. We're just gonna grab this T25 and zap that out of there. Now, some of you may have, if your car's a little bit more original or doesn't matter, typically you can also have a cover that sits underneath this intercooler, like a protective plastic piece, just like this shield we took out, and those typically lock in to the bottom of this. So just keep in mind, if you can't get to those T25s, you probably just have to twist and unlock those quarter turn clips, and then you can pull that little shield off. This car doesn't have that, but just in case you see that and it looks a little different. Now let's do the passenger side. First, we'll pop off the clip, just like we did on the other side. Now we have another T25, just like we did on the driver's side. All right, now we have the hardware undone. We can work this intercooler forward and out. Just very gently, kind of a gentle twist like so. And this is a great opportunity to put this outside, hose it down, just rinse it through, take a look through the fins. If it's covered with debris, just like your radiator would be, it's a great time to clean it out and make it nice and spiffy before it goes back in. But I'm gonna set this to the side. We'll clean it off camera. But now we have a better view at the bottom of our radiator. So let's get a little bit more cozy with that. Now we're gonna work on draining our radiator. We have our petcock right here. A large flat blade like this will do, or a 19mm socket. I'm just gonna go ahead and break this free. We have our catch pan situated, of course. And just get ready to catch your coolant. And again, be aware there's some shield still under here, depending on the kind of bumper you're equipped with. It may splash off of that, so just be mindful. And then we'll give it all the time it needs to drain. All right, I'm just gonna raise that up. We'll give it its time, and then we'll come back to it in a little bit. Just using a 19mm socket, I went ahead and pulled out the plug on the bottom of the radiator, just in case you're gonna be using the OE style. So you can see this is what came out. These are the two that are included with the CSF OE style replacement. So obviously if we were going to be installing that radiator, we would go with the longer unit just to match the one that we pulled out. So just super simple. That's all they're talking about when they're saying match up what plug you pulled out. So this is what that little blue part of the petcock that we pulled out with the flat blade was. So. All right, we have two transmission cooler lines coming off of the DCT, one on either side of the radiator. We're gonna go ahead and undo those as well, a T25 per each side. Okay, T25 is out. And now we're just gonna work the connection off of the radiator nice and gently. You can use a small flathead screwdriver. Again, we're replacing this radiator, so we're not too worried about hurting the radiator. Just be mindful with the line. You don't want to damage that. Just gonna wiggle our hose off now. It's normal for a little bit of coolant to still be in our system. These transmission lines are pretty long. Now we're gonna do the exact same thing on the driver's side. We'll deal with the seal a little bit later once we have the radiator out. All right. With that one out, now we can pop out the line just like we did on the driver's side. Again, expect a little bit of coolant to come out. Get your catch pan situated. You'll be good to go. So give it a gentle wiggle. It's just an O-ring that's sealing. Now with the last cooler line out of the way, we can access the lower radiator hose. We're gonna go ahead and unplug that now. Same style, quick disconnect clip like we have on the intercooler pipes. Just gonna pop that baby out. That's unlocked. These can get pretty stuck sometimes, especially if they've been on for a long time. These are original, so I don't suspect they've been off before. So breaking that seal can be a little bit tough. In this case, we're gonna be removing and replacing this radiator. I'm not too worried about damaging this part of it. So if I end up prying off of it, no problem. But if you're not doing that, you're just taking it out and then reinstalling, be a little bit more mindful as you work that hose off. I'm gonna try just popping it off by hand and see what happens. Giving it a couple wiggles. The fact that I am wiggling the whole car is incredible. I'm gonna pop the clip off. I'm gonna take the seal out that keeps fighting us. We'll show you how to transfer that over to the new unit in a moment. I'm just gonna go in here with a pry bar. Again, I'm prying up against the radiator only because we are replacing it. If you want to, this is too big, but a thin piece of wood, obviously much thinner than this, you can lay it up nicely against the flat surface and pry off of that. That's not going to damage the face or the fins on your radiator. All right, we'll let that drip a little bit, and then we're going to lower the car back down. We'll head up top and finally get this old radiator out of here. Up top, we're going to disconnect the upper radiator hose. This one also has a second hose, or third if you will, coming off the bottom side of it. So just like the expansion tank hose up top, we have another one down right on the other side of it. So what I'll do is we'll undo it from the radiator, and then we can undo it from the engine side if we want, and we can kind of flip it over and get a better view of that bottom hose. There's a little bit of slack in there that we can do all that. So just like the other ones, clip, we're going to pop this baby up. I'm going to take this one off. Just be mindful with these, you can't really just replace these, so don't lose them. We're putting a new hose on, so we're not too worried about that. We're gonna work this baby off. Pry with a small flathead screwdriver. We're prying off the core super gently. I'm just wiggling it as I pry a little bit. Kind of get that going. There we go. Then we have the hose on the oil filter housing side of things. I'm just gonna get it started from the back side here. Then I'll wedge another flathead in. Perfect. And we can wrestle this baby off of here. I'm going to pry off the housing very gently, just to get that little extra. There we go. With that one off, we can now rotate down our hose a little bit. We can see the clip here for the bottom coolant line coming off of that. This one we're going to be keeping, so don't lose the clip. We'll unlock it. We'll take a flathead, just kind of help spread it off the hose here just by putting it in and twisting. There we go. You can see here in the light the discoloration on that bit of the hose. It's exactly what we were seeing on the opposite side here, where the plastic just gets so brittle over time and then just falls apart. All right, now that we have that upper radiator hose off, we have a couple more pieces of hardware holding on this radiator. You want to leave those till the end, that way it's not flapping around as you're trying to work these stubborn hoses off. So we have a T25 up here by this AC line. Let's get that one next, and then we have one more on the driver's side. With that T25 undone, now both of them are off and our radiator should just simply pull forward and out. So we'll push out on that. Oh yeah. Just be mindful there's still some coolant in this radiator. We have a couple rubber feet down at the bottom that we need to recover once we get this up here. This AC line gets a little snug. Don't bend it, but you can just blow on it a little bit, get it out of your way if it's fighting you. And as we come up, our hoses are going to want to get stuck on the neck for the lower radiator hose. Make sure it didn't A, get back in there by accident, and B, just push the hose out of your way if it's binding you up. So these can be a little bit tough to get out if it's your first time doing them. Even for me, that I've done these before, they're a bit tough. And what's happening is these sides of the tanks, they're getting hung up on the AC lines on this side, going into the AC condenser. So the goal is almost to get, you have to pick one side or the other. I find it easier to pick the driver's side. Push that baby down, and you start pulling this up at an angle, pushing away from the AC condenser. These lines have some give. Push into the block, get basically this hump over the AC lines, and then you kind of work it over a little bit while pushing away from the AC condenser so you can clear the last bit of the AC line connections, and then you get the driver's side up, and then you get it up at an angle. It kind of keeps this from fighting on the passenger side and the opposite on the driver's side, and then you can pull this sucker out. It's a little bit of coolant left in it. We're going to go ahead and drain that, but take a quick look at what this looks like after 124,000 miles. There was no way that was as efficient as it was, 10 years ago. So whether you're replacing it or just removing it, take the time if you're going to be reusing it to clean this out, run a hose through it, a pressure washer. Just be mindful not to damage the fins. For us, we're getting rid of this. It's time to get the aluminum one going. So let's put this to the side and get that shiny baby over. All right, we have our shiny new CSF aluminum radiator. It's time to drop this baby in. A couple things of note with the aluminum upgrade. You'll notice that some of the hardware, which was T25s on the old unit, is now hex bolts. So these are going to be specific for the all aluminum units, as the threads are different now. So you can either choose to leave these on as you send them down. These are going to be for the transmission cooler line, so you can pull them out whatever you like. One thing that's a little bit different is now you have almost like a set screw that is going to hold or pinch down the fan shroud once you get it inside of these channels. So same thing, we're just going to leave them loose for now. Up top here we have the bolt that's going to be replacing the T25 that helps hold the shroud up against the radiator. Then of course we still have the two tabs on either end that are going to hold the radiator to our AC condenser. For those we will be reusing the T25s. Our goal here is to feed this down gently, and we have a tab on either side of the radiator. These are aluminum versus the plastic ones on our plastic end tanks. These are going to help key into the bottom of the support. It's pretty straightforward. It really only goes in one way, and you'll be able to tell if it's sitting nice and flush versus taking up the space of the fan shroud. So with that, let's gently feed this baby in, being mindful of the hoses and any harnesses that we might come across on our way down. Just to give you a quick look of where those tabs sit, down here you can see it's almost like a like a V shape. That's where those metal tabs at the bottom of the radiator are going to key in. No rubber feet like I thought momentarily ago. I'm just thinking E39 M5 things. So these are going to key in here. You have the same thing on both sides, just to show you what that looks like a little bit better. We are ready to install our new radiator. I've gone ahead and just folded up the lower radiator hose and tucked it next to the cylinder head, basically around the bracket of the vacuum things. I'm blanking on the name. We're gonna go ahead and feed these hoses, push these over so that they can go over our bracket. And then just how we took out the old one, we're gonna go at a little bit of an angle to get this new one in, get around those pesky AC lines and go from there. Just be mindful of any harnesses, other coolant lines that may be in the way as you go in. Taking out the two bottom 8mm bolts are going to make it a little bit easier when you have to clear coolant lines like this that can get in your way and hang you up a little bit. It just gives you a better chance at not getting stuck and not damaging your radiator hoses. So just gently going to work on wiggling that over, and then we can continue dropping this down. So the name of the game here is basically just keeping everything at a bit of an angle so you can get those bottom two brackets that key into the, we'll call it the whole core support. So you can clear them around the AC lines. Those are going to be your biggest hang up here. So just work side to side. It's really hard to show what's going on in here, but once you start going, you'll see that the only thing hanging you up is the feet on the edges of the radiator. So once you get past those two AC line junctions, you're pretty much good to go. So we just got past those. It's basically self-installing itself now. We're going to make sure that it's sitting nice and flush. And then we can go ahead and tuck it in and get some hardware started. So you can see a better look at the tabs lining up in their little pockets at the bottom of the core support. So that's exactly what you want on both sides. The driver's side's a lot easier to see. All right, let's get our two T25s and we'll get those started. Then we can start attaching the rest of the hoses and fan shrouds and all that good stuff. Just to show you what this looks like under the car, because it's very important. If you don't key this in properly, then everything's going to be misaligned. Your fan shroud isn't going to fit in properly, intercooler, all that good stuff. So basically, you can see the end of our aluminum feet here that key into the bottom of this core support. You can see we have about maybe 1/4 inch of a gap of plastic in front of it. That's how that should sit. This aluminum end or plastic end, whichever tank or whichever radiator installing, should not be flush with the front. It should be sitting nice inside of here. You can see there's still a little bit of debris we couldn't get out. I'll get that out now. And then another thing you can do is look between the radiator and the AC condenser, and you'll see that they're nice and parallel next to each other all the way down. There shouldn't be a gap larger down here on the bottom than there is up top. So just make sure you check that. If that looks right, it's also going to lock the radiator in. You won't be able to move it. Then you're going to be good to go. And while you're down here checking that, you might as well check the other side being a lot easier to see. And if you haven't already, make sure that drain plug is nice and snug. Usually they come snug, but just checking them isn't going to hurt, and it's just nice and gentle. You don't need to destroy that rubber seal. All right, we're going to get our upper T25, get that baby started. I'm just going to try to push it in by hand, turn it a thread or two, then we'll snug it up. Again, super gentle, no more than 2 Newton meters if you're wild enough to torque these down. They are just going into plastic, they're coarse thread. Just snug it up and you're good to rock. Bam, driver's side done, onto the passenger. Same thing, this one we can't really see much, but we can feel. See if we can get a thread or two started. With those upper radiator hoses situated, now we can start hooking some things up. I'm going to go ahead and tackle the lower radiator hose while I have it here in front of me. And then we can go ahead and lift up the car. We'll get the transmission cooler lines in place, and then we'll get the intercooler back in and go from there. Now we're going to feed our lower radiator hose back on. Again, it only goes on one way. You'll see there's little tabs on here, just like the plastic unit had, to help key the hose in place. Just give it a little wiggle so it situates itself. Now we're going to install our upper radiator hose, getting the oil cooler side of things first in place. There we go. A little bit of coolant on those O-rings if you haven't done so already. There we go, baby. This bottom one we can just push up from the bottom now that it's secure. Oh yeah, baby. There we go. All right, now with our lower and upper radiator hose installed, let's head underneath and get those transmission cooler lines in place. So one thing to remember with those of you following along using the aluminum or all aluminum upgrade, the hardware, a lot of it is going to be changing to the 10mm hex bolts that CSF provides. So for the two transmission cooler lines down below, again, this is a DCT car, we're going to be using the new 10mm hex instead of the T25s. So just be mindful of that. Grab your 10mm socket and let's pop these lines in. Now either T25 or 10mm and just snug this up. You don't need to go too tight with it, especially if you're still going into the factory style OE rad. Even with the aluminum one, you just need to snug these up. They have lock-in washers. You'll be good to go. Beautiful. Let's do the other side. All right, at this point we have both of the cooler lines attached for the automatic transmission. Again, DCT, standard auto. Now we're gonna work on getting the intercooler reattached. But if you remember, our old radiator had a rubber seal that ran along the bottom edge here. That simply pops off. You can key it back onto your new radiator. So we're just gonna go ahead and do that, and then we'll feed the intercooler over, get that baby bolted back up. And again, if you haven't done so already, don't forget to check the drain plug on the all aluminum unit. They usually come in pretty snug and marked up from the factory. Just double check. Using a little bit of RTV just to keep it in there. These seals age over time and the fit may be a little bit different from the OE to the aluminum, but a little bit of RTV or some soft glue that can be undone should this need to come out again. And we're good. Now we can feed in the intercooler. Same way we're gonna kind of feed it up at a angle, just how the old one came out. We have a little bit of room on this plastic apron to just pull down and give us that little bit of wiggle room we need. Obviously you line up the intercooler properly up against the bottom of our whole core support here. This can be a little bit tricky, especially when you have your own intercooler piping fighting you and all that good stuff. All right, now we're just gonna work on getting our sides lined up so we can get our T25s in place. With that clipped in, you can go ahead and reattach the intercooler pipes if you like. I'm gonna do the passenger side. We'll put our clip back on. I'm gonna leave the driver's side off. If you remember, there is a bushing that holds that charge pipe in place on the fan shroud. So we wanna have a little bit of play on that one. So that one will stay loose, but we can go ahead and clip in the passenger side. There we go. You just want to hear that satisfying click. Make sure that baby's situated. Your clip is nice and snug. You should be good to go. All right. With that, now let's go ahead and tackle the fan shroud next so we can get this cooler attached to it once more. And then we can get this charge pipe fitted, expansion tank hose, and fill this baby up with coolant. Just something to note before you head up top. The radiator has two small tabs that comes off of it. That helps lock in the very bottom of your fan shroud assembly. If you look at the bottom, you'll notice there's two small tabs. If you can get those lined in, then you're gonna be good to go. Obviously you have the tabs on the side as well, but these two bottom ones are very important and it lets you know that everything's aligned properly, and then we can attach everything else to it without it flopping around. So let's do that now. Anyways, we're gonna continue on getting the fan shroud in. I just crawled underneath to see what I was getting hung up on. It was just the bottom edge of the fan shroud getting clipped into like one of the locating tabs at the bottom of the radiator. So we just went down there, pulled it away, And now we're going to continue working this in. All right, at this point, we're getting close enough where we can start lining up our locating tabs for the fan shroud against the radiator. You'll note that the all aluminum has 10mm bolts that will pinch down the little ears versus the release tab clicking into the metal hook there like it did on the plastic end tank. With our shroud in place, before we do too much more, we're going to secure our hardware to just hold it in place for us. So again, the upgraded aluminum uses 10mm bolts provided by CSF. If you're going with the OE style replacement with the plastic end tanks, now you're going to want to pull out your T25s once more and get those started. And if you look further down, right where we are right now, you can see the other 10mm. That one will cinch down the ear on the fan shroud assembly. You have one on either side. You can go ahead and snug those up now. Okay, with the fan shroud secured, now we can work on routing the coolant lines. Remember those alligator style clips that we had to pop off? We have the rubber bushing for the charge pipe. We can get those situated, and we can put our clamps back on the driver's side charge pipe, both up top and at the bottom. Get our electrical plug situated, and then we'll double check our work. We'll go underneath, make sure the fan shroud isn't in any weird position, and then we can go from there. We'll get our expansion tank line in place and fill this baby up with some coolant. Now our goal is going to be to get this little clip on the rubber bushing on the fan shroud. We should be able to just push it on and over, especially since it's been on here before. We're going to do that before we adjust the coolant line. There we go. Underneath this coolant line, there's another clip that's on our fan shroud, alligator style clip. We're going to open that up, and then we can pop that line in. You might find it easier to leave the clip on the hose and just attach it from the shroud. But for us, it was pretty firmly stuck in the shroud. So we just went with the route of opening it up and popping the line out. So now we have the little bit of a tedious task of just popping this open, positioning it correctly, and getting that open for our line. Cool. Let's get this charge pipe clamp up top while I have you here. Okay, that's nice and snug. We don't want to crush that pipe. We have one more line up here. We can pop this baby in. Same style clip. There we go. Beautiful. Before we continue anything else up here, I just want to crawl underneath the car one last time, button up everything, make sure our fan shroud looks good underneath there, and then we'll come back up top and finalize everything. Now we can go ahead and install the driver's side charge pipe. This can be a little bit more of a tight fit. We have a significantly thicker radiator now with the all aluminum versus the factory plastic. So everything's going to sit out a little bit. Second set of hands can be helpful here to get this back into your intercooler. So just be mindful if you're having a little bit of a hard time. It's not totally unreasonable. It's just you're working with a little bit of a bigger piece of equipment. So it's going to require a little bit more oomph to get everything over. Just give it a nice pull, make sure it stays in place. Now we can grab our T25 and our screw, bolt this cooler back up, and then the shield can go on. My good people, one good thing to note, and this applies to any aftermarket part that you're installing, especially if it's an upgraded part, a little bit bigger, wider, thicker, whatever it may be. One thing to note is that the packaging, which already tight, for example, on an N54 car, can get a little bit tighter, meaning that sometimes things can fit a little bit differently than when they were in there with their stock counterparts, meaning maybe this fan shroud changes a little bit in its positioning against the radiator and intercooler. In our case, what we were fighting with this driver's side charge pipe is this rubber bushing. You saw me point this out when we took the fan shroud out earlier. And it's just a little bushing that sits on the fan shroud, and the factory stock charge pipe kind of just bites around it. Kind of keeps it from vibrating or rattling up against the fan shroud or moving around a little too much. Now, realistically, more than likely you have an upgraded intercooler and charge pipe system at this point, in which case you're not going to be using this rubber bushing. But for those of you that are still using the stock charge pipes and the stock intercooler, you may note that this fit is going to be a bit too tight. In our case, we had to pull the bushing. There's been times when we haven't had to do it at all. In this case today, we had to do that. So just be mindful before you sit down there for 3 hours trying to get this together and breaking your charge pipe or damaging your intercooler. Try popping out the bushing if you're fighting this bottom connection and go from there. Now with that, T25, let's hold this cooler onto our fan shroud and the skid plate can go back on. With this all installed, let's head back up top and continue on with this DIY. All right, up top, we can go ahead and plug in our electrical connector for our fan again. And if it still has them, go ahead and attach those alligator clips back in place. Underneath this radiator support, you'll see there's a couple little plastic clips, and those can be used to just secure this harness in place, keep it from dancing around on us. Let's get our expansion tank line situated. Again, that was one of those brittle ones that was bound to break, especially being original. 120,000 miles. Okay, pull that baby off. And tuck this baby under our harness. I could have done this first. But, you know, hindsight's 27/38, so no problem. Let's plug this side in. Beautiful. 2 little tabs here at the shroud. You can push your hardline portion of this expansion tank line in place. Now we can attach it to the upper radiator hose, which is where it broke initially. Don't forget to put your clamp on before. So you're gonna have to pull it back off after. Get that nice and snug. And then we get our favorite pliers. These are Intercooler style pliers, and we'll just cinch that baby down. Beautiful. All right, now we have our coolant line situated. We have our harness back in. All we have really left to do up here before we fill it up with coolant is put in our air feed to our air box. So let's do that now, and we'll fill her up. Make sure the front side of this has the ducting protruding through just a little bit. That'll make it easier to secure the hardware that holds this portion in place. And then we're gonna grab our 2 T20s. Okay, we have some plastic rivets, again, expanding rivets to feed in. At this point, everything is reinstalled. All we have left to do is fill the vehicle with coolant. You've seen us do this multiple ways. Today, we're gonna be using the vacuum fill tool. However, if you wanna see the method using the electric water pump, be sure to click the link in the video description below where our very own Gareth Foley shows you how to do that. We have it on a couple other N54, N52 DIYs as well. But for today, vacuum fill tool, let me get my coolant mix. We have 50% distilled water in there and 50% antifreeze. Catch you in a moment. We have our U-View vacuum fill tool set up here. If you've seen us use this before on the channel, the goal here is to pull vacuum in the system, get it to about 25 units on our gauge. And typically you want to give it a minute or two to hold just to make sure there's no leaks in the system. Obviously we just messed with the entire cooling system aside from the water pump and thermostat. So this is a great time to check before we fill. So I love using this tool. Even if you weren't going to be filling the vehicle with coolant, you can still use it just to check for leaks. So we're going to go ahead and pull. I always like to use a little bit of a shop towel and just hold it around the nozzle because, you know, there's times when there's still a little bit of coolant in the system and it kind of aerates out of here. So keeping a little towel on there keeps that from misting your whole space and everything. So we're going to give this a few minutes, make sure it's holding, and then we'll pick it back up with opening up our valve. The goal here is to keep the other end of the hose at the very bottom of our bucket. Don't ever let it come up because the second you pull air, this whole thing becomes null, void. Olvídalo, no good. So catch you in just a moment. Now we'll just let this do its thing. Once it comes to a full stop, it'll drop back down to 0. You can lift up the cone. And then the last thing here is going to be taking it for a test drive making sure we have no leaks, again, once the car gets up to temperature. Once the car is nice and stone cold again, be sure to check your coolant level one more time. This isn't the say-all be-all, but it gets you pretty dang close to the correct coolant level in the expansion tank. Overall, my good people, that is going to conclude this DIY for today. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave those in the comment section below. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.